Hello, everybody. My name is Reggie Gackett, and I want to welcome you to the first webinar in the 2019 Fall Family Webinar Series. I'm the Assistant Director in the First Year Center, and tonight I am joined by my colleagues, Mark Glenn, Chief of Police of the Washington University Police Department, and Rob Wild, Associate Vice Chancellor for Students, for Student Engagement and Transition and Dean of Students. We are excited that you have chosen to join us for tonight's conversation. Some information before we get started. First, you will notice that we have given you the ability to submit messages to us during the webinar using the chat function. Please use this feature to ask us questions. These questions will only be seen by staff in the First Year Center and our panelists, Chief Glenn and Dean Wild. Two of our professional staff members within the First Year Center are helping to field these questions. We will answer those that we find applicable to the audience as a whole on this webinar, and we will respond to more nuanced or personal questions via email later this week. Let's go ahead and make sure you know how to use the chat feature. Send us a chat with the place that you're watching from, and we will name a few of these places on air. As you do that, this webinar is being recorded live. Next week, we will upload this webinar to the families.wustl.edu website. Lastly, in a moment, we will hear from Chief Glenn about the services offered by WUPD. If something Chief Glenn says sparks a question, don't forget to chat us. After hearing from Chief Glenn, we will move into the Q&A portion of the evening. Before passing things off to Chief Glenn, I want to share some of the places that people will be joining in from. We have families tuning in from Boise, Idaho, Raleigh, North Carolina, and St. Louis, Missouri, among others. Now, since I know you all want to hear more about safety on campus, I will turn it over to Chief Glenn.
Thanks, Reggie. I just want to start by kind of explaining a little bit about the police department and who we are. So we are 43 officers strong. We have our own dispatch center that's housed within the police department. So total, we're about 70 people in the police department. Our officers are deputized through St. Louis County and have full police authority throughout the state. But the caveat with that is that we only provide services to those areas on campus and in the neighborhoods surrounding campus. And while we're certified through St. Louis County, we do have limited authority in the St. Louis City, but work very closely with both departments to provide services. We are a supplemental agency to those off-campus neighborhoods, while we are the primary police agency on the Danforth campus and the South 40. We offer a variety of services that all police departments offer, but then we also have some specialty services that we offer based on working on a college and a university, which includes a very robust education program where we get involved with students both in the classroom settings as well as in student events throughout the year. Reggie, that's about what I have for the department. I'd just like to answer questions.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chief Glenn, for answering and giving us that insightful information. While hearing you speak, I wanted to ask an initial question that I think many family members may be wondering. Can you tell us a little bit more about what services are in place for students who need to get home off campus late at night?
Sure. We provide escorts 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We formalized that recently with our newly created bike team. We have 6 officers that are assigned a bike, and they patrol both on and off campus. At any time in the evening time, from starting at 6 p.m. till 2 a.m., if a student would need an escort, all they have to do is call our police department at 314-935-5555, or fistful of fives as we refer to it here, and request an escort. One of our bike officers or 2 of our bike officers will meet the student wherever they are, and we'll escort them, whether they want to go from campus to off campus to on campus, or even transit the off-campus neighborhoods and go from one apartment to another.
Thank you. How does this year compare to other years in terms of crimes occurring near campus affecting members of the Washington University community?
This is the second year in a row we've had a spike of crimes right at the beginning of the semester. This is not unusual from what we've seen throughout the St. Louis metro area. I talked to many other chiefs and many other law enforcement leaders, and they see the same things. They're seeing a cluster of crimes in an area, and then it kind of stops. And we've seen the same thing last year at the beginning of the year and again this year at the beginning of the year with those street crimes. So it's not unusual. We've developed a plan to address those, And we've devoted additional resources to help ensure that this stops and we kind of deflect those crimes elsewhere.
Thank you. Dean Wild, could the university provide housing on campus for all students?
Thank you, Reggie, for that question. So again, my name is Rob Wild. I'm the Dean of Students here at Washington University. I appreciate that so many of you are with us this late afternoon here in St. Louis on this very important topic. As Dean of Students, I work with a number of departments and programs on campus, and I have the great fortune of working with the Office of Residential Life. A quick word about housing. The question was about how housing works. I suspect we have some new families here that are on the webinar. Washington University is fortunate that we provide housing for all undergraduate students for all 4 years. That's a commitment we make when we admit students to the university. And as many of you know, most of you know, we actually require all of our first-year students to live on campus, and they live on the area of campus that we call the South 40, that many of you, especially our first-year families, were with us actually almost a month ago, moving in students. About half of all of our undergraduates actually live on the South 40. Most sophomores, even though there's not a residency requirement, choose to live with us, and those sophomores almost all live on the South 40. We have about 1,000 spaces of campus of housing located on the north part of our campus, which, if you're familiar with our campus, is over by the athletic complex. It's where we have about 300 beds of fraternity housing. And then the Office of Residential Life has acquired and renovated some properties, as well as built some new construction in the last 10 years just north of campus in the neighborhoods, primarily in University City, but also in St. Louis City with the Rosedale apartments. All in all, about 70% of our students choose to live with residential life housing. I have had some questions this week from families about why we don't provide housing on campus all 4 years. And the very short version is, at the present time, we don't have the capacity or space to be able to do that. We are doing some master planning right now when it comes to housing, and we're always looking at opportunities for housing. But I will say, for we are constantly surveying our students for their interest, and we know that historically not all students have asked to live on campus, and so we have made it a priority to invest in safe, convenient housing that's near campus in neighborhoods where we have other students, graduate professional students, faculty, and staff living.
As a follow-up to that, when you refer to off-campus housing, does that include housing that is not overseen by Residential Life, or only WashU-owned and operated properties?
Yeah, so just to make sure I'll try to clarify this, but we guarantee housing for all 4 years through properties that are managed by the Office of Residential Life. These are fully furnished properties that have university staff living and working in them. And that's what I was referring to when I was talking about all guaranteeing housing for all 4 years. The university does own a small number of properties that are not managed through the Office of Residential Life. Most of that, 1/3 of our students, undergraduate students who choose not to live with residential life housing, actually live in privately managed apartments that are near campus.
Chief Glenn, a little bit earlier, you were talking about what a student needs to do if they are looking for, say, an escort or something like that. So what should my student do if they need an escort after 2 a.m.?
There's a couple options for them. One, they can call us, the police department, and we'll ensure that they get an escort 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But there's also some transportation options to them. So if they're on campus and they're heading to their apartment, they can utilize the campus to home shuttle that picks up at Mallinckrodt. It runs every 15 minutes, and it will take them directly to the front door of their apartment, and the driver will stay there while they watch the student go into their building to make sure they get in there safely. There's also some shuttle options with the North Campus Shuttle and a few others that kind of go around campus. But when all else fails and shuttles aren't running, if they call the police department, we will provide a safety escort for them.
Thank you. Did the recent crime incidents involving students occur within the jurisdiction of the Washington University Police Department or outside of the area? Can you illuminate about that a little bit?
Yeah, 3 of them did occur within our jurisdiction and our off-campus patrol areas. The other one, the last 2 did not. We did respond to provide help to those students that were involved, but they were out of our jurisdiction. If you would go to our website at police.wustl.edu, so that's police.wustl.edu, and there's a section there that says about us, and it's about the police department. You can access a map that shows our patrol zones in those off-campus neighborhoods, and it's detailed enough where you can see the street names, so you can know exactly where it starts and where it ends.
Thank you. To clarify about one of the questions that came up earlier, in order to get for escorts, your student will need to call the Washington University Police Department. So that's the 314-935-5555 or fistful of fives, and not 911. Also, the Washington University Police Department can escort to anywhere near campus, including properties not owned by WashU. Can one of you tell me a little bit more about this Noonlight app that students may be interested in downloading?
Sure, Rob, I'll take that one. So Noonlight is a safety app that we contracted with, and really the easiest way for me to describe it, it's a blue light in your phone, in your pocket. You can activate the app off your phone, which is free of charge for Washington University community members, and I'll talk about that in just a sec. But while you're walking, you can turn that app on and hold your thumb on a very large green button on the phone. And then when you arrive safely, you let off, you'll enter your PIN number, and it turns off. But if something happens and you need help right away, all you have to do is remove your thumb from the phone. An operator will try and contact you, and if you don't answer, they will automatically send police resources to you. Why we went with Noonlight is because it works throughout the United States. So if your student travels or is back home, it still works there, and it works by GPS. So to download that, if you go to Noonlight, and it is located on the emergency website for the university. So it's emergency.wustl.edu, WUSTL.edu. You can download that, and it's going to come to a screen that says you have to pay for it. And once you enter your email address, it'll recognize that you're a community member, and then it's free of charge.
Thank you. Dean Wild, for juniors and seniors who would like to live on campus, how does that process work?
So that's a great question. I also just want to clarify one additional thing, and that is we are going to be hosting a future webinar through the First Year Center related to the housing process and the returning housing process for students returning. So this question is specifically about how students can request housing and are juniors and seniors able to request housing on campus. Our housing system is a lottery system, and so based on a student's lottery average, they will select not just who they want to live with, but when they log into the system that we have, the housing portal, they are able to then select a room with their group, an apartment or a suite based on their lottery average. I will tell you, because I've worked with housing for many, many years here, that we are not always able to accommodate the entire demand for housing on campus that we have. And so that's why we've invested in properties that are adjacent to campus and a short walk away to be able to accommodate students who would like to live near campus. We do sometimes on a case-by-case basis. There are students who have specific needs or concerns. This is something I hope that you have heard in other sessions at WashU. If you or your student have a special circumstance that they need to let us know about, they can let me know about that directly, or any of my colleagues that work for me, and we will always try to work with them during the housing assignment process. But I think a lot of these are good questions about the housing process, will be answered through that next webinar that we'll do on housing selection.
Thank you. What hours does WUPD patrol around campus and in the neighborhoods?
So we provide 24-hour coverage. We do have a separate unit within the police department that patrols off campus in those neighborhoods. They begin at 8 in the morning and they go till 4 in the morning every day, 7 days a week. From the 4 in the morning till 8 in the morning, when that unit starts back up, our on-campus patrol officers do get out into the neighborhoods and patrol them as well.
Thank you. What is Washington University doing to reduce crime rates and improve safety for students in the local area?
So first, we have really good partnerships with our local municipalities. And at times it can be difficult because there's so many. The areas around campus that we have students and that we patrol include the municipalities of St. Louis City, University City Police Department, unincorporated St. Louis County, and Clayton Police Department. So it's kind of a juggling act. We also work really closely with the MetroLink unit, which includes officers from St. Louis County and St. Louis City, as well as the MetroLink security, to help with the security, safety and security on the MetroLink, because so many of our community members use that. So while we partner, we also exchange information on a regular basis. Our off-campus unit shares a building with the MetroLink police from both St. Louis County and St. Louis City. So there's a constant exchange of information. We do host weekly meetings with our investigators and our officers that work in those areas so that they're exchanging information, and then we keep updated with events that are going on, as well as any recent crimes, so that we're doing a combined effort when we approach that in our patrol. With that, I work really closely with the chiefs of those agencies. I generally talk with them weekly. We again exchange information and ensure that our respective departments are supporting one another as we go through some of these. That's kind of the short term. Unfortunately, what we see through the metro area is the crime is systematic, and it's going. There's no place that's immune for it. We see it as far out as West County, which is 30 miles from here, all the way to downtown. One of the issues we have as a region is trying to stem these crimes and work together. And I can tell you from working with other leaders within the university, they're committed to helping with that as well.
Have you all had the opportunity to look at incident data and see if the new security measures are creating a positive change in our community?
So we do. We share. We have not had recent incidents, and that's kind of our first measure with what we look at. We also, again, as we're talking with our neighboring agencies that we partner with and we provide supplemental patrols with, we gauge from them what they're seeing. They also share their statistics with us, so we kind of see if there's anything on the periphery of our patrol zones. But again, we realize it's a partnership with those agencies, and using data helps us in that partnership.
And I would just add to that, Chief. That's a tricky question. The question about are our interventions working, because you don't know whether the additional bike patrols, the transportation measures are, you don't know if crimes that won't be committed because of those. But, I think one of the things that I always pay attention to is we have a lot of staff, professional staff, graduate students who work with us, who live in the neighborhoods around campus. And, I often will talk to them about, how do you feel living near campus? Are you seeing increased police presence? Are you, have you had the chance to have a positive interaction with a member of the Washington University law enforcement team? And, almost across the board, I hear comments from staff in our neighborhoods that they do feel that presence. As we have said all along, one crime to anybody in the community, student, faculty, or staff, is one too many. But I think we, how we are deploying our resources at the moment is really the most effective way that we can to try to deter crime from happening.
And I could add one more to that too. Our officers conduct what we call sidewalk safe talks, where they get out of their vehicles, they get off their bikes, they stand at high traffic areas, and they just talk with students, and they provide safety tips and ask questions and see how they feel. And it's really well received, and we've done a lot of those little educational moments with them, as well as gotten some good feedback and kind of altered what we've done to make sure that we're attentive to our community's needs.
Thank you. Are there alternatives to police escorts if students don't want to call WUPD, say, on a Saturday night? So, for example, they may have been attending a party and would prefer not to call the police to be taken home.
So again, we talked about those transportation options that are available. And if you'll go to the transportation website, they will list all the times that those options are available from the shuttles. and I'm kind of understanding, I think, where this question's going. And I'm a father of 3 daughters that I sent away to college, so I kind of know what they do on Saturday nights. We don't look to get students in trouble if, say, they've underage and they've had something to drink. We want to make sure they get to where they need to go safely. They won't be interviewed or interrogated because they've had a beer. We want to get them where they need to be safely.
As a follow-up to that, you've mentioned the campus to home shuttle. Is there another bus that stops on campus and then takes students to their off-campus housing?
So go ahead, Rob.
So we have something, and you can see the routes on the transportation website called the North. Sorry, I just blanked on the name, but it's called the North Campus Shuttle. That is the primary shuttle that would serve the neighborhoods where we have lots of students living, and that would be something worth looking at to see if your student lives on or near that route. We actually did make a decision to expand the hours of that route based on some feedback that we heard from students in light of this recent incident, and we're looking at whether that can be a permanent change moving forward. But that is a shuttle, and you know, we've invested in these new shuttles that you know, have WashU branded on the side. They're easy to find. The student just needs to have their ID, walk on, show the driver, and that will take them on the route. The other thing I don't think we've mentioned is the partnership we have with Metro here in St. Louis, which is the public transit option here in the region. We are proud that we offer every member of the community, students, faculty, and staff, a complimentary what's called a UPass, which allows students, faculty, and staff to access the Green Line, which is the primary bus system that goes to and from neighborhoods. You can see that information on the Parking and Transportation website, as well as Metrolink, the light rail that serves downtown, Central West End. A lot of our students like to travel to different places farther away from campus, and that provides that as well.
Thank you. Uber was offered last year to students. Can we continue that this year?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Reggie. Thank you for that. Just for those who are not familiar, last fall around this time, the university initiated a pilot program with Uber to give all students at the university in kind of a geo-fenced area a couple of rides a day to get them to and from campus. And for those who have read the recent letter from Chancellor Andrew Martin, he has reminded everybody that that is not something that the university is planning to continue again this year. That was a program that we brought about based on some very specific circumstances that we had last year, namely that the East Campus parking garage, which accommodates a very significant fraction of parking on the Danforth campus, was still under construction. So students in particular were having difficulty getting to and from campus. We had very limited options for parking on campus, as well as the closure of the pedestrian bridge that connects the Danforth campus to the neighborhoods to the north, where we have large numbers of students living. Since last fall, we've enhanced our existing transportation infrastructure with many of the things that we've talked about here today in terms of shuttles and the campus to home, and we feel confident in that. The other thing, and I just want to be very honest, because as Dean of Students, I want everybody to know that, you know, as these recent incidents were happening, I thought to myself, you know, is this the time for me or Chief Glenn to again suggest the Uber program to the university as an option? And in looking at the incidents that happened, it's unclear whether having an Uber or subsidized Uber would have prevented those unfortunate crimes from happening. And so I think that, combined with it's a different time and space for the university, we're working on other options. But we definitely appreciate the question, and we've talked to a lot of students and families about that question in the last couple of weeks.
Thank you. In regards to recent events, do you know if the crime sprees were perpetrated by the same folks, by the same people? Have they been caught?
So talking with St. Louis City, who has the primary case and is conducting the investigation, there appears to be some similarities between the crimes, but we can't positively say it was the same people. They're working through that. I know they're making leads in their investigation. There has not been an arrest made yet, but they continue to work hard and try and identify who's responsible for those events.
Thank you. What systems are in place to notify students, members of the community, and parent and family members when there is crime happening?
Rob, you want me to take this one?
Sure. Go ahead, Chief.
So we have an emergency notification system here on campus, and it's kind of a layered approach. We have our emergency notification, which we would use in an event like an active shooter or ongoing crime. And it would be very vague at first, just telling people stay away from this area, this is going on, and offer some suggestions for what they can do to protect themselves. And then we would update as that goes on. And then the next layer is a timely warning of the crime alerts. And this would be if there was a series of crimes that we want people to be aware of and take specific action to protect themselves from. And then the last one is our security memo. We generally use this, and this is what most of our emergency notifications and alerts have been, is this a security memo. It's more of a situational awareness bulletin. So this incident has happened. This is what we've seen with it. These are some steps you can take to protect yourself, so that people are aware that incidents are going on. Most recently, we had an incident that occurred not in our patrol zone, but based on the recent crimes and it being the proximity fairly close, we went ahead and put that information out because, again, we want our community to know what's going on around them so that they can take appropriate measures to protect themselves.
Chief Glenn, you mentioned a little bit earlier about the work that WUPD officers will engage with students one-on-one through safety talks. What other types of education does WUPD provide to students?
So we try to tailor it for the students and their particular situation. And I think we're fairly unique as a police department to do that because we will take the time to make sure we're addressing specific issues. We also host a RAD program for both men and women. It's a self-defense program that's used nationwide. A lot of universities utilize this program. It is a simplistic self-defense program. And what I mean by that is I've been to classes where they're trying to teach people to do roundhouse back kicks and things that you would see in the movies. And it's just not realistic. It's not what people are going to do in a stressful situation. So we teach a variety of techniques of how they can protect themselves if they find themselves in a situation. The other thing that we really try to work hard on is the mental approach to safety and security, how they can get themselves out of situations and how they can prevent them from going on. We have a class we call In Defense of Self, and it teaches that mental approach to people so that they recognize. With that, we also come out and do site surveys for apartments and residences, that if someone feels that their residence is not safe or the lighting around their apartment building isn't up to par, we have certified crime prevention officers that will come out and work with them and offer them suggestions and help work with even private landlords to make sure that their space is safe. So again, we try and tailor it to each person's individual needs.
We've received a couple of other questions, but as a reminder, family members, if you have other questions that you'd like to send us in so that we're able to answer them, feel free to send them in now. Have you seen an increased usage of the late night WUPD escorts since you've implemented them?
We have seen. I have my officers, they let me know every night kind of their activity. We've, again, seen an increase in our sidewalk safe talks and the student engagement. We also see multiple escorts every night, both from off campus to campus, campus back to off campus, and even from one apartment to another. You know, the other thing that we have is we have a couple satellite areas off campus, like our 560 Trinity, which hosts a lot of late night music classes and practices, and as well as some other areas that we also have provided escorts from those to residential areas for students.
Family members, thank you for those additional questions. How would my student sign up for a self-defense course?
If they would go to our website, again, police.wustl.edu, and I'm just going to plug that a little bit. It's brand new. We just redid that this year, and it's much easier to navigate. So if you've been to our site before, you will notice a big difference. But if you go to that, you can find the self-defense tab there, and you can see what classes are already scheduled, and you can register for that class right then and there. If you're looking for additional classes or the class doesn't fit your schedule, there's a link that will email our coordinator, who is Lieutenant Gwen Patton, at the police department, and she can keep you updated when new classes are scheduled.
Thank you. Dean Wild, can you tell me more about WashU's plans to increase on-campus housing?
Yeah, great question. So we have been working over this past year with an architecture firm called Studio Ma out of Phoenix to really take a look at our campus master plan and where we have opportunities for increased housing. I should point out, for those that aren't aware, the South 40, which is our largest residential community, is located in the city of Clayton. And because of the relationship that we have with Clayton, we are constrained, we're limited to only have a certain number of beds because of a permit that we have with the city of Clayton. So that the options that we're looking at now would not be necessarily located on the South 40, but we're exploring other options at the present time. It is not likely going to be our goal with this process that 100% of all undergraduates would live on the Danforth campus. But we're as I said before in my earlier comments, we know that right now we're not quite able to meet demand on the Danforth campus. And so we're exploring options either right next to campus, in the neighborhoods near campus, as well as on campus for that. I have to say though, as for those of you who know about capital projects and construction projects like this, for the families that are on this call, unless you have a middle school student at home, your current student is probably not going to benefit from the changes related to housing. This is the planning that goes on right now. It will take a few years to realize, but we're happy to continue to hear feedback about that, and we'll be sharing those plans as they continue to develop.
Chief Glenn, do you find that students who identify as men are taking advantage of the evening escort service? If not, any types for or any tips for how I can encourage my son to do so?
Yes, when I talk to officers, they're escorting multiple people, to include male and females. There hasn't been, talking with them, there hasn't been any, really it's been fairly equal in the number that we've escorted. A lot of them are in pairs and they still request escorts, and we're happy to do that. And the one thing I would tell you is tell your son if they have to get them to ask is we just want them to be safe. And it's not a burden. I guarantee it, they'll walk with that officer and they'll have a good time. It'll be a great conversation. They'll learn about that officer. They'll learn about other resources that are available to them. And it's kind of a great connection for them to learn and get to know an officer and know someone that they can contact in the future if they have a question or problem.
What tips can you offer me to have a conversation with my student who might say, I'm safe because I walked with a friend? It sounds like these escort programs and systems are a little bit better.
Yeah, they are. Why we always encourage people to walk in pairs or groups. What we've seen recently in some of the crimes is that there have been pairs involved in those street crimes. It's always safer to have a police officer walk with you. Again, we want to do it. We want to be available to our community, and we want to make sure they get from point A to point B as safely as possible.
Thank you. Dean Wild, would you be able to talk a little bit more about, say, like cameras and whether off campus there are access to closed captioning cameras?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Chief Glenn will have to make sure I'm being factually 100% accurate, but I'll take a stab at that one.
Okay.
So we have been fortunate to work with our surrounding jurisdictions, which includes both municipalities as well as neighborhood associations, to really partner around two key crime prevention strategies. One involves lighting, and so we've invested in a significant number of lighting projects that we call Brightways projects, that are connectors, mostly pedestrian or bicycle connectors, between areas of the campus and areas where we have large numbers of students living near campus. And we've been fortunate both with the improvements in LED lighting technology, as well as our neighbors being willing to allow us to add lighting to their neighborhoods to do some significant projects. In fact, I should highlight a parent that gave us some feedback last week on where their son resides. We've been able to identify another neighborhood in which we're trying to work on a lighting project right now. So that kind of feedback is helpful. The other thing that you mentioned, Reggie, is around closed circuit cameras, which again, particularly in University City, we have greatly enhanced our presence of university. We help foot the bill for the cameras, even though they're located in the municipalities. And for both our own police department and our neighboring partner police departments, those have proven not just to be a deterrent, but also help in solving crimes that have happened near campus. And it's a pretty, I have to say, having been here for over 20 years, what we have today is a pretty robust system, both in terms of the quality of the technology as well as the coverage and the location.
Thank you.
Good job, Rob.
Would you agree? Okay, good. Thank you, Chief.
Dean Wild, I know that there are security officers over at the Lofts, which is an off-campus Washington University-owned apartment complex on the Del Mar Loop. Is this something available at all off-campus properties that WashU owns?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what Reggie's talking about is a property that the university opened in 2014 called the Lofts, which is a very large property located right on the Del Mar Loop that includes an underground parking facility, multiple buildings with multiple entrances, a very robust student community that is inhabited almost primarily by juniors and seniors. And when we built that project, we had the opportunity to design some security features based on the size of the project and its location right on the Del Mar Loop to be able to add 2 desks where we have contract security staff that work with the university and with our police department to provide security coverage there. For the other properties that the Office of Residential Life owns off campus, as well as the other properties that are not owned by the university, but where we have large numbers of students, we rely very much on the work of Washington University Police to provide the visibility and the coverage. And I'm going to mess up the name, but you have a neighborhood security program that's part of the police department.
Yeah. Neighborhood Patrol Unit.
Neighborhood Patrol Unit.
Yep.
That provides a similar service to what we have in the Lofts, which is security staff that are near building entrances, that know the high traffic patterns of students and will position themselves in their vehicles and often on foot.
Yes.
In areas. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong camera, but in areas where those students are.
Yes.
Chief Glenn, earlier you talked a little bit about blue lights. Or mentioned them in passing. What are they, and what is the response time for a student if they were to push one of those buttons?
So blue lights are emergency call boxes, for lack of a better term. So they're around campus and in the neighborhoods. They're generally on a square post with a large blue light on the top. That's why we call them blue lights. There's a red button, and if they hit it, it's similar to calling 911. The beauty of the program is that it goes to the police agency that services that area. So if they're on campus, it would come directly to the Washington University Police Department. If they were on the area around the loop, it would go to University City. If they were in Skinker to Bolivar, it would go to St. Louis City. And again, it's just like calling 911, and that's the response you get. We also supplement those blue light phone calls when they go in University City and St. Louis City. We can provide a little bit quicker response at times. So we try and do it both ways. But again, it's just like calling 911. If you would press that, that's the typical response you would get from law enforcement.
Thank you. Chief Glenn, you mentioned the partnership with the other local police departments. Can you talk about a little bit more about how you're joining efforts to target quote unquote high crime areas?
So that is a great question. It is something that we always work on. Again, we have good relationships with those local agencies, both St. Louis City and University City and Clayton. We partner to provide, again, our patrols that we're working together, that it's not just one department doing one thing and another department doing something completely different. We want to make sure that we complement each other. We also do a lot of education. So both University City and St. Louis City and those neighborhoods have really strong neighborhood associations. Our officers go to those meetings and they're ingrained with that community, and those community residents get to know our officers. So they know that there's additional resources available to them. And we work together to provide safety and security in those neighborhoods.
Thank you. Are there any required safety sessions or engagement that all students will encounter during orientation?
It's a great question, Reggie. Do you mind if I field that?
No,
one?
no, go
Okay,
ahead,
yeah.
Ron.
So in our current model, we work really closely through the Office of Residential Life to partner with the police department, and Washington University Police Department leaders help train our resident advisors and our residential college and residential community directors, who are the students and professional staff who live in the communities. And in our current model, we rely very heavily on the residential life staff to communicate the key safety messages, both to new and returning students living in the residence halls. It's scripted into floor meeting agendas that we create, and that allows us to custom some of those messages that we might want to be a little bit different about, whether you live on the South 40 or whether you live on the Del Mar Loop and the lofts. I will say Chief Glenn and I have been in conversation with our new expanded orientation model to potentially increase the contact that police officers and others involved in campus safety have directly with our new students in our orientation programs. So I expect that we'll probably be able to, by next year, make some enhancements that provide even more training opportunities for students related to campus safety.
Reggie, can I add one thing to that?
Yes.
So the other part about that educational process is we do have what is called a Res Life Greek Life Liaison officers that work specifically in those housing areas. They make great connections with RAs, and they do a lot of programming with RAs. And generally, we'll get into each housing area at least one time. Many times, it's multiple times throughout the year to have those discussions or participate in events and be open. So again, those students that live in some of those residential areas have an officer that they know by name that they can reach out to if they have a question or need help.
Thank you so much. Chief Glenn, you've mentioned the crimes that take place near campus. What are the most common crimes that occur on our campus?
So probably the most common crime that we have that we take reports on campus is the theft of unsecured property or poorly secured property. Our bikes that get stolen are generally either unlocked or have a cable lock that is easily manipulated and broken. Bikes get stolen, and then property that just gets left unsecured, and it goes from the far extremes. We hear it all the time. Well, I just walked to the bathroom. Well, what we try and tell people is if it's not secured or someone's not watching it, that's unsecured, and it doesn't matter how long people are gone, from 5 minutes to 2 hours. Leaving property unsecured in open areas leaves it really vulnerable to be stolen.
So we are receiving quite a few questions about the housing selection process. As Dean Wild mentioned, there will be another family webinar hosted by Residential Life about the housing selection process specifically. We are collecting the questions that you have about housing selection, and we'll make sure that they're answered during that webinar. A couple of family members have mentioned that they are looking online and having difficulty finding information about the escorts and shuttles. The First Year Center will post some information about this to our website tomorrow, so you can easily find the link. And that website is families.woostel.edu. Do you also have a community outreach program to bridge connections to the community who may also be experiencing these same conditions and may be able to work in partnership to build a safer community at large?
Yes, we do reach out. Part of our neighborhood patrol unit also reaches out to other neighborhoods. Again, we have a really strong network. I'm a member of the St. Louis Area Police Chiefs Association. So I meet with St. Louis area police leaders on a monthly basis. I'm also a member of the Missouri Police Chiefs Association. So we try and help each other. We tend to learn in the area who has expertise in what areas, and we offer each other help. If a local department would need assistance with self-defense classes, we would go help them. We recently helped St. Louis University and their protective services unit just with that, is ensuring that they had adequate instructors for a self-defense course. So yes, we do work together and make sure that as a region, we're trying to help each other.
And I would just add with the residents who live in the neighborhoods around campus who are not necessarily students, we work really closely, mostly through our Office of Government and Community Relations. Both Chief Glenn and I have the chance to partner with their staff on a very regular basis to make sure that we're understanding what we're hearing from neighbors who, as you know, our students don't live 365 days a year necessarily in those neighborhoods where we have families who do live there 365 days a year, and we need to understand what trends they're seeing, how they are interested in partnering with us to work to address some of the crime prevention systems that we have in place. And often those are around the things that I've mentioned, such as lighting or transportation systems, increased police presence and visibility.
Chief Glenn, we have some folks asking, how big is the WUPD police force? Are there any plans to increase the WUPD police force size?
So we're 43 officers strong. In fact, our last officer to bring us up to full speed starts on Monday. So we'll be up to full strength at that time. We currently do not have any plans to expand. We expanded last year, adding 4 positions, which started our bike team, and then we reorganized the department so that I could put 6 officers on bike, and they work a shift that allows us to kind of readjust and move them around to different times and different areas. So currently we're not looking to add additional officers.
So we're going to ask one last question for the evening. As a reminder, any questions that we were not able to answer during this webinar will be addressed via email directly to the person who posed the question. Chief Glenn and Dean Wild, thank you so much for the information that you've shared tonight. For our last question, what systems are in place for the university to receive feedback from students and families about on and off campus safety?
Can I take a stab at this one?
You want to go first?
I know you've gotten to take all the good questions.
It's all yours.
So I want to mention a couple of things. Thank you for that question. So first of all, you should mention to your students that our student government, called Student Union, has created a survey, a safety survey for all students that was distributed last week. One of the things I love about working with Washington University is oftentimes our students really help us understand what even more clearly than we think we do, what the needs of our community are. So if your students have not had a chance to see the Student Union survey that was sent out, please tell them to take a look at it and take a few minutes to complete it. Student Union, the student government, is planning to share the results of that survey with Chief Glenn, myself, and some of our colleagues in a way that will hopefully help us continue to improve when it comes to campus safety. The other couple things I'll mention for those who are coming to Parent and Family Weekend, and I hope you are, which is November 1st through the 3rd, we are going to have a special session on campus safety. So if you'd like to meet with us and talk a little bit more and hear about anything that's happened since this webinar, or ask us a more private or personal question, we will be available for that, and take a look in the schedule for that. And the last thing I'll mention is that if you saw the Chancellor's note, he has asked our Executive Vice Chancellor for Administration, Hank Weber, to convene a group that will contain students to really take a look at what it is we're doing when it comes to campus safety. And we will be collecting information from students as a part of that as we look to make sure that we're really maximizing our resources and how we invest in campus safety. And then did you want to mention anything about the advisory?
Well,
yeah.
There's a couple other, for specific security or safety information, you can call our police department 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can also go onto our website, and there's a safety concern section that you can submit it, and it comes right to me, and we'll take care of it. And the last thing we have is I started this year an advisory committee for the police department, and it's made up of both graduate and undergraduate students, and across the board, involved with different activities and different groups. And they're kind of a voice to me and Rob. Rob sits in with that meeting with me, and they let us know what they're hearing from their peers and some of the issues that they're facing, and offer suggestions on how we can improve the services that we provide students. So we rely pretty heavily on them to give us that information as well.
Thank you so much. Chief Glenn, Dean Wild, the information that you provided this evening was extremely helpful. I am confident that family members of Washington University students have learned quite a bit from your presentation. Families, we hope that you learned some valuable information this evening. Stay tuned for our next webinar, a conversation about academic success occurring next month right before fall break. You will be able to register for this webinar at families.woostel.edu. Thank you so much, and we'll see you then.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.